Welcome, everyone. We'll just give it another minute or so because the numbers are still going up. Welcome, everyone. My name is Karen Mock, and I am pleased and proud to be the acting chair of Enhancing Social Justice Education. Just quickly, for those of you who aren't quite sure who we are or what we are, we were created, it's almost 15 years ago now, originally as alumni and teacher educators and other educators connected to OISE, the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. We are a completely volunteer organization. And because we had noticed in the years previous that somehow social justice education and equity and inclusive education, particularly in universities and teacher education, was not as inclusive as it had once been when many of us started in the field. Our goal, our desired future, we did a strategic planning not too long ago and really firmed up our vision statement, is for a truly inclusive social justice education, such that no learner or educator is silenced or marginalized. I'm not going to tell you much more. We've got lots on our website. You'll check it out, and we're going to provide you with the contact information a little bit later on before we finish up. Of course, we start our webinar with the land acknowledgement. And we take this opportunity, I'm going to have to move my pictures that I can see. There we go. The land acknowledgement. We want to take this opportunity, of course, to acknowledge that we are each participating in this webinar from diverse traditional territories. And the work of Enhancing Social Justice Education Group takes place on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. And we commit to meaningful dialogue and solidarity to restore our commitment to support action for necessary change. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and to work here. Why have I put up this additional concept of the land acknowledgement? It's because sometimes, and you may feel the same way I do, it feels as if the land acknowledgement has become kind of pro forma. And I wanted to emphasize some of the meaning to us and why it so fits in with our values. It's just a small but a very important step in the process of reconciliation and building positive relationships with Indigenous peoples. It's a recognition of their presence, both in the past and the present. And for us, because our work includes such a diversity of peoples, recognition and respect are essential elements of establishing healthy, reciprocal relationships that are key to reconciliation. And when we counter and prevent hate, aren't we looking for also reconciliation when people have been at each other and promoting hatred in the past? We must also remember that we are all accountable to these relationships. It involves thinking about what happened in the past, the impact of trauma, including inherited community trauma, on mental health and well-being. But we also must consider what changes can be made going forward in order to further the reconciliation process and to strengthen relationships with all those impacted by colonization, discrimination, and oppression. And this, of course, is in keeping with our values of human rights, equity, inclusion, and social justice. And now to the topic at hand. What is hate? I only have a couple of slides. Why are we doing this webinar and going more in depth today than we were able to in our conference? Some of you, many of you on this call right now, were at our conference in December called Stop the Hate, Start the Dialogue. And we were very pleased that one of the breakout groups was on hate and what we should do about it. However, for technical difficulties and timing issues, not everybody had a chance to go into the depth of their speaking that they would have liked. So we don't want to make it too repetitive for the people who were at the conference. And Saleha Khan was able to go over all the definitions of hate and hate crime. But what I'm going to do is just provide a couple of brief slides to remind those who perhaps weren't at the conference the kinds of definitions that we're using today. So in terms of what is hate and why it's so powerful, I am an educational psychologist, so I'm going to take the psychological understanding of what hate is, because in my role as a teacher educator, I'm very conscious of the emotions that are in the room, that right now in times of difficult conflicts, there is so much emotion and people feeling hate at each other. So what is it? It's a feeling. It can cause angry or resentful emotional response that can be used against certain people or ideas. It's often associated with feelings of anger, disgust, and a disposition towards the source of hostility. Acts of hate are attempts to distract oneself. Again, this is a psychological kind of analysis, from feelings such as helplessness, powerlessness, injustice, inadequacy, and shame. So people who are feeling powerless or feeling oppressed will often lash out with hate against others and those that they feel are the oppressors. Hate is grounded in some sense of perceived threat. It's an attitude that can give rise to hostility and aggression towards individuals or groups. Now, we all tend to throw around this word hate and hatred, and I know that one of the reasons we want to do this is in schools, too often people say, well, it's their freedom of speech. They should have a right to say things. Well, in Canada, free speech, yes, we believe in free speech. It's part of our values and freedom of association. But we draw the line at hate speech. And so it's important to understand that hate gets fomented. We see it in many, many ways. Here you have the folks in Charlottesville screaming, "Jews will not replace us," and horrible, horrific, hateful slogans against Jews. And we see that anger and hostility can be directed at many, and here you have examples of Proud Boys and other extremist groups jumping over the fence to attack the White House and the Congress. Why? Because the anger, the hate had been fomented through what you will find later we understand to be propaganda. But I want to emphasize how in the province of Ontario, hate crime is actually defined. I was privileged to chair the Hate Crimes Community Working Group for the Attorney General and the Minister of Safety and Corrections that launched the strategy for the province to address hate crime in Ontario. And this final report contains many recommendations and there's resources that go with it. We're going to talk about resources at the end, but that people don't have to reinvent the wheel in school boards and in training programs, because there has been much done in the area of countering hate and hate crime. We're going to get to that throughout our session. But the Supreme Court of Canada, in its decision on Keekstra, and we recorded this in the report of the Hate Crimes Community Working Group in 2006, defines hate or hatred this way: emotion of an intense and extreme nature that's clearly associated with vilification and detestation. A key concept here is identifiable groups. Hatred against identifiable groups thrives on insensitivity, bigotry, and destruction of both the target group and of the values of our society. Hatred is an emotion that, if exercised against members of an identifiable group, implies that those individuals are to be despised, scorned, denied respect, and made subject to ill treatment based on their group affiliation. It was important for us to make the difference between a hate incident or a hate and an actual hate, well, in our community or its members. A vulnerable community is any group or community identified as such on the basis of a personal characteristic protected by Section 15(1) of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And a hate crime is an actual criminal offense committed against any person or property that's motivated in whole or in part by bias or prejudice. Notice it's the motivation that's key. Hate motivation. This is based on real or perceived race, ancestry, with that of a victim or that of associates with whom a victim is closely affiliated. But there are grounds of discrimination: race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, handicap, age, marital status, family status, record of offenses, and receipt of assistance. The Enhancing Social Justice Education Group can't stress strongly enough the importance of all of us countering hate incidents, hate crime, preventing hate in our schools, in our workplaces, in keeping with building up human rights and in the interest of equity and social justice for all in this country. Now, that is enough from me. We're very pleased to have a stellar panel of two fantastic guest speakers and a wonderful moderator. And I have the privilege of introducing Saleha Khan. I did mention that Saleha had been the speaker, the first speaker in our breakout group on hate crime at our conference. And because she's had her chance to do that, that's why we're thrilled that she's here as the moderator, and then therefore will be available for the Q&A. Saleha, that as some of you may not know, has led the evolution of what she told me was called DEIA-B. And I learned that meant diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging for law enforcement. She, I know, has conducted many training programs and written guidelines and manuals. Some of those you'll see a little bit later in our resource. And she has done training and has had leadership specifically with municipal, regional, and provincial police organizations, associations, and services in Ontario. As part of operationalizing content on human rights, equity, accessibility, reconciliation, and inclusion, Saleha developed and managed training and education specifically on hate crime and hate propaganda for more than 20 years. And that means that I've actually known and worked with Saleha for over 20 years because we first met each other when I was heading the League for Human Rights of B'nai B'rith Canada and was doing the hate crimes training for the emerging, in the 90s, the emerging hate crimes units in our various police services across the country. Saleha has also developed and supported police services in strategy development, critical communications, community and stakeholder engagement. I could go on and note that she's not only worked with many diverse communities, but has worked very closely with Indigenous elders and partners on supporting reconciliation and building community collaboration. And that's exactly what the Enhancing Social Justice Education Group stands for. Building allies so that we all work together to enhance social justice education for all. So Saleha, take it away. And thank you so much for all the work you've done and for the support you're showing for the Enhancing Social Justice Education Group.
Well, it's an absolute privilege and an honor to be working with Dr. Karen Mock. Yeah, we discussed a little bit briefly yesterday. It's like, when was the first time we met? And we started going back, and it was like, oh my God, it has been from the time when Dr. Mock was at League of Human Rights. That's just, I'm going to say freaking amazing, but yes, it is. It's
And
absolutely.
please, Saleha, it's Karen. Otherwise, I have to,
Oh, no. Yes, of
you
course.
know.
Of course, Karen. I also have the absolute honor of introducing Elizabeth Moore and Heather Thomas. I have done a little bit of a boo-boo where I have misplaced their bios, so I am very, very quickly looking at their websites. So Heather Thomas is it's just a what is it? What do you call it? A tsunami in her own, if I could use that one. She is the executive director, someone who's been on the program initiation for lifeafterhate.org. This is an organization that is situated in the United States, but it has presence everywhere. And there is so much work that is being done. I'm very quickly looking through their website. They've just started they're just announcing the Center for Exiting Violent Anti-Semitism. And their focus is around ending violence through compassion. And it is, of course, a people-powered platform. And they have actually worked extensively on reducing impact of hate on what was known as Twitter and is currently known as X. So it's absolutely an intense amount of work that has been done specifically on fighting hate, very much targeted towards vulnerable communities and very much targeted specifically towards Jewish communities, which, again, we continue to find, unfortunately, that whenever we start looking at hate and racism, anti-Semitism, unfortunately, is recognized as a bit of a canary in the mine kind of scenario, where when we start seeing rise of hatred towards communities, Jewish communities tend to be receiving a little bit extra attention by the white supremacists and by fundamentalist groups. The other person on the call with us, and the other lady on the panelist, I'm sorry, I'm calling you lady. I'm sure you are way more than that, is Elizabeth Moore. She and I have actually worked a little bit together at the, when we started together on the oh my gosh, ESJE. It has been an absolute honor working with her. She's an educator, she is a writer, she's an author, and she is a fantastic guide, and of course is also part of the group that is working on making this particular initiative an absolute success. So I just wanted to welcome both of them. And we are going to start with, I believe it's Heather who's going first. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. I am going to share my screen. Please let me know if it's successful. All right. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about hate speech propaganda and radicalization in online spaces. As was mentioned, I'm from Life After Hate. I've been with the organization for about 8 years now, and we do amazing work in helping individuals move away from radicalization and online hate spaces, and change their ideology and become part of society, and become safer human beings. And that's really what we've been focusing on for the 15 years of Life After Hate's existence. So I'm going to actually start with the definition. I know Dr. Mock brought up the what hate speech looks like, and in the Canadian context, and I'm going to take it one step further. If hate speech and propaganda festers, what it becomes. And so that is, again, in the US context, we define radicalization as the process by which individuals come to believe that engagement in or facilitation of non-state violence to achieve social and political change is necessary and justified. And then violent extremism is defined as the encouraging, condoning, justifying, or supporting the commission of a violent act to achieve political, ideological, religious, social, or economic goals. And that's something that Life After Hate works with regularly. We work with violent extremists, former violent extremists, those who have been encouraging, condoning, or justifying violence to achieve their goals. And it starts with hate speech. It really starts with online and offline, but we're focusing here specifically online hate speech and propaganda. And so I pulled this directly from the UN site on hate speech and understanding hate speech. This is just a really quick run through of how it's defined and really what hate speech entails. And it can be images, cartoons, memes, objects, gestures, or symbols, again, both online or offline, that are disseminated throughout a community or online space. It is always discriminatory, always pejorative. There are a lot of stereotypes, prejudices, and demeaning and dehumanizing pictures, images, cartoons, words, and it's really to create an outgroup. As we heard in the introduction, there can be so many different factors that go into creating that outgroup. It could be misogynistic, it could be based in racism, it can be based in anti-Semitism. We can be talking about anti-Muslim hate, anti-LGBTQIA hate, or anti-Asian hate. We could be, defining things. It's always calling an outgroup out and making them further away from our own group. And so identity factors largely in that, again, religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, language, we talk about disability, health or ability, sexual orientation, the list goes on and on. But these are all things that we're seeing in hate speech and in propaganda. Again, to create that divide, to dehumanize the outgroup, to dehumanize somebody, and that sets them up for attack. So as I said, hate speech is propaganda. The ways in which people spread propaganda are various, but it's always to vilify, dehumanize, demonize another group, to incite violence. It's toxic misinformation, which we're seeing a lot of online, especially here in the US, but I'm sure it's global at this point. There's stereotyping, and then there's also genocide denial, and that can be recent occurrences of genocide. It can be, World War II and the Holocaust deniers. There's just so many facets to that genocide denial component of it, and that doesn't hold through all. It's not a through line in hate speech and propaganda. However, a lot of times the misogyny and anti-Semitism do hold as a through line through many forms of hate speech and propaganda. That seems to be one of the items that is always present. And so I wanted to go into a little bit more depth on what we're seeing in our own organization And just in general, we're seeing that algorithms are so tailored and created specifically to generate content that appeals to a person's interests. And this is really becoming even more an issue than it was even 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, with young people specifically. We're seeing that a lot of times in gaming, in online social media platforms, people find or hear things that their friends might be interacting with, and they're curious and they want to know, what does that mean? Or I've never heard that word before. I've never seen that image, and why is everybody laughing about it? Or, something's passed around at school, or somebody posts something and it looks subversive, or it looks dangerous, and they want to know more. And so they do a Google search for an image search, or they go to TikTok and they look up something, a word or a phrase or a quote, and all of a sudden they're seeing things that are pretty dark, and then they keep going, they want to know more. And young people are always curious and want to know more and want to understand and explore the world around them. And so oftentimes we're seeing young people, young adults, going into these spaces, and within a weekend or two they're radicalized, or they believe things that they didn't know 3 weeks ago. And they're starting to espouse those beliefs and repost them online, or talk about them with friends. And so that's where we're seeing that very damaging and very quick escalation to radicalization and violent extremism within our younger population. Specifically, I wanted to just make a note that oftentimes we'll look at something online, a favorite pair of tennis shoes or something we want to purchase, and you think, oh, my phone must be listening to me, or the algorithm has really got me down good, because you see that pop up in everything that you're looking at. You see an ad for the same pair of shoes, or the trip that you wanted to purchase or go on, and you'll see it in social media. You'll see coupons or something that comes up within your email inbox within a few days of you checking it out. And so that's what we're really seeing happening with young people, and their curiosity with propaganda, misinformation, disinformation, and politics. They're really trying to understand and get a hand on what's going on right now, and a lot of times that leads them to really dark places. And lastly, I'll kind of talk a little bit about countering hate speech and propaganda online. So there are a couple ways. I just talked about the dangers of social media and online gaming. I do also want to say that those are some of the best places to reach young people and people who might be tempted or have already begun that descent into violent extremism or extremist beliefs. And so, oftentimes social media can be both good and bad. And we need to meet people where we are, and where they are consuming this media. And so Life After Hate, the organization I work for, has worked closely with Meta for years and years to help moderate some of the hate speech and propaganda that is happening online, and to redirect people. So we have a pop-up that comes up if you look, for example, look up Proud Boys or some other organization, or hateful slogan or slur. They will be redirected to Life After Hate's landing page, and it will say, it looks like you're looking up some pretty damaging, detrimental stuff. Do you need help, or do you know a loved one who needs help? And so it will redirect it by asking questions, and that gets modified every few months with our team here. But it's really asking questions, saying, are you sure you want to look this up? This is damaging, or misinformation. Do you really know what you're looking at, and would you like to talk to somebody about it? And that's how they're directed to us. Online gaming, same thing. There are so many different avenues for people to chat online and build community and build friendships. And it can be used for good, or it can be used for bad. And I know that there are online communities that do work to mitigate misinformation and hate speech, and there are moderators who are in charge of that. There's also Discord, and Discord, I'm sure, has been touted as being very dangerous. Life After Hate actually has a Discord channel where we talk about difficult topics, and we fact check, and we educate people who want to join the Discord on the dangers of becoming radicalized and being an extremist in this very polarized time. And then also building community and relationship is so, so important. I know it was mentioned before, but building community with people who are diverse from your friend group, your community, your church group, making those those connections with the community are so, so important to building that empathy and compassion that Life After Hate talks about, that every group that is doing this work talks about. We need compassion and empathy to better understand what people are going through and to have a softer view of the struggles that each individual has, and to really mitigate that hate speech and counter it. We need to know a bit more and be more open to speaking with people outside of our, I would say, normal, our typical daily life. And so to do that, we have a wonderful organization called Acquaint that we are familiar with and that we try to point people to. The link is here on my slide, but they have over 100 countries with many, many, many volunteers that have one-on-one conversations, and you can set up those conversations. You get a little bit of training on how to have good conversations, and there's a whole process there. You can sign up to be a volunteer, but it just exposes people to different perspectives around the world and different points of view, so that intercultural and global communication and community can better be created. And so I would highly recommend going to acquaint.org, checking them out. It's a wonderful organization and they do wonderful work. And if you do want to know a little bit more about Life After Hate or our podcast, The Daily Former, I would say check it out. I do have a contact slide next, but The Daily Former is a podcast by former extremists, for people who are potentially in the movement or are considering leaving. And we encourage people to listen to the podcast. I will say there's a content warning that comes with that. It is very raw. There are topics that you may not want to play while you're at school or in the office. But I would say it's something good to listen to get a better handle on what's going on currently. And those who have been in the movement and have gotten themselves out have wonderful stories to tell and really give a lot of hope to those who are in the movement currently or are grappling with hate and hateful ideologies. There's such a wonderful resource there for those who are just having trouble maneuvering through that process. So with that, I'll close out. There is contact information here. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'd be happy to answer any other questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
And I'm just keeping an eye on Q&A, so if you've got any, please feel free to put them in there. We will get to you as soon as we can. I'm going to now invite Liz.
Hi, thanks, Saleha. I'll just share my screen if you just give me one moment. All right. And let's go to the beginning. Pardon me for a second. There we go. So yeah, I usually, when I get onto panels, I talk about my experience, which is drifting farther and farther into the distant past of actually being radicalized and embracing hate and falling into an extremist group. But I really felt that for today that I really didn't want to focus on that. If people have questions, I'm happy to field questions about that in the Q&A afterwards. But I was just feeling like, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this, just feeling like we are fighting a tsunami with a thimble right now, is how I like to put it. It's how it feels to me. And I feel like a lot of times we are feeling despondent, dejected, just down about just the general state of all the things. And I really wanted to approach this from the other side of that, though, and look at what is happening now that's actually exciting, that's actually innovative. Because if we continue to just do what we've always done, unfortunately, it's clearly not enough. We need to like break through those silos and get people where they are. So I reached out to colleagues and friends and just asked people like, what is going on right now that is really exciting you about this? And inevitably every single person said, well, nothing at all. And then they'd stop and think and said, well, there's just this one thing. There's this one thing. And so what I have for you this afternoon is a collection of all of those one things. And some of them are things that I've found. Some of them are things that friends and colleagues have given to me. And I hope that they will create some space for you to find some hope and excitement and maybe some innovation as well in how you approach it, whether it's with colleagues or if you're in the classroom. There are opportunities there. And the first one I have actually is an example of what Heather was talking about with gaming and how gaming can actually be part of the solution instead of just being a really big part of the problem. And so the one example I just have for you today, I won't go into it in too much depth, but there is a Holocaust museum in Fortnite. And when I heard about this, like it just blew my mind. Like, how is there a Holocaust museum in Fortnite? But there is, and they've thought it out really well to make it a respectful and safe experience for people to like learn and reflect on things. And so I have a short video here. It's only a couple minutes long that I think it will just give you a better sense of what it is to see it as opposed to me talking about it. So I'll just play that now.
80% of Americans have not visited a Holocaust museum, and in the digital age, the solution may not be to build many museums, but only one. The Voices of the Forgotten Museum, created by Luke Bernard, is a map in Fortnite, ordinarily an online shooter. Removing the game's signature emotes, weapon, and crafting emojis, the map instead provides a quiet museum experience to visitors.
I don't know if museums work or not. I'm being 100% honest. I don't know if real museums work or not because I don't see the data for it. But let's say imagine they do work. I'm like, okay, can we just make a digital museum?
The Voices of the Forgotten has multiple wings, each focusing on different elements of the Holocaust. A central exhibit focuses on Kristallnacht, while other exhibits focus on less often discussed topics such as the Holocaust in Tunisia. And there's more to come.
So this week we're going to be doing something about Romani. We will. The week after we'll be bringing in Guidon Lev to tell his story because he's also on TikTok. We just do an update after update. So,
oh wow! Prior to making Voices of the Forgotten, Luke Bernard created the free-to-play narrative game The Light in the Darkness, which tells the story of a working-class Jewish family during the Holocaust. While Bernard is proud of the museum, he also recommends that people play the game for a more story-driven interactive experience.
But I'd also say now things, because I know the museum has got a lot of attention, I do still believe The Light in Darkness works better. Because, you know, a story affects people, it does. People actually try it in, they're moved, they actually talk about things after.
The museum has drawn unwanted attention from the online far right, with fascist commentator and Holocaust denier Nick Fuentes encouraging his fans to forgive the museum.
But Epic supported me very much, they did. And especially when Nazis went after it, they supported even more. Like there's no emotes, there's no vocals, so no one can just yell things. And so you have had neo-Nazis be like pissed off because they can't do anything. So instead, some of them are just jumping in front of the exhibits, and people that when they visit it, they just kind of like, okay.
To the many educators who may be skeptical of gaming as an educational medium, Bernard has this to say.
It works, and we need to be taking it seriously, but also you can do things at a fraction of the cost and reach more people. And that's what I think we need to actually be focusing kind of on that.
I'm Andrew Mike.
So obviously this is just one example, and there are many people doing many things about it. Like that could be a whole other webinar in and of itself, but this is just one example that really excites me right now. And I'll just move on that if we want to also talk about, you know, getting people where they live, sports is another option for that. And, you know, again, I have to be honest, not my area of expertise at all. I'm a dance parent, not a hockey parent. But I went to a conference last fall hosted by Barb Perry and her Center for Bias and Extremism at the Tech U in Oshawa. And I went in there really not knowing what to expect because I was like, it's hockey, like they're confronting hate in hockey, but they actually really are confronting hate in hockey, and it's showing up in big and small ways. And like some of the small ways are, allowing pride tape on the hockey sticks, and that apparently took some advocacy on the part of players and advocates to have that be allowed in the NFL. There are authors who are and academic researchers who are addressing the issues around the sexual assaults that have happened, the problems in hazing that have happened, and also just the exposure of young people to racism and other types of hate on the ice. And it's really was shocking to me. And I'm afraid I don't have my research notes in front of me that I took that day, but it was something like 12, 13, 14, like really, really young is when they are first hearing their first slurs on the ice. And it was just really heartening to see that there's this whole community of people that are coming together to just increase visibility of different communities participating in hockey, addressing these kinds of issues, and that this just has the potential to expand to other sports. And really this is maybe maybe a little bit much, but you think of the metaphor of, if you raise the water in the harbor, all the boats raise. And this seems to be what is happening here with this beginning of this activism. And it's important to note that it is coming from the players themselves and from former players, from coaches, from administrators who are involved directly in hockey organizations. So this is one of those situations where for once the call coming from within the house is actually a really good thing. And it's just really great to see. I'll just flip back to online stuff. If you want to go like really grassroots, this is really like it can seem kind of daunting, I guess, to start, a YouTube channel or, I refuse to call it X, a Twitter, a Twitter account or a Blue Sky account and think that it's going to reach people in such a crowded arena. But there really is the opportunity for that. And one of the content creators I just want to highlight is someone named Dead Domain. And just in the effort of transparency, this is a person who had interviewed me for one of their documentaries, and that's how I learned about them, is they actually came to me. And what is really interesting about what they're doing is they are a trans person, and they do have a lot of privilege around race and gender passing, and they use that to go undercover to places like CPAC, and they've gone undercover to Christian nationalist churches, and to just kind of show it and report on it from the lens of being trans in America in 2024 and 2025. Is really kind of amazing. So a lot of their stuff is very serious and long form, but they also do some comedy stuff too, as using humor as a way to kind of poke fun at people who have very tight, small worldviews. And I just have this like, I promise, just 30 seconds of them making fun of people who were countering Target and other American vendors who had pride wear in their selection of clothing. And it's anyway, I just think it's fun, so I'm going to play it.
Hey, we're here at Target today to expose the woke LGBT agenda trying to turn you and your kids gay. Trans people will always exist. Just makes you sort of think to think about other people happily living their lives. Happy. So stained. So degenerate. So gay. Oh, I love that color. We have a pronoun shirt. Back in my day, none of us had pronouns. We liked it. Now fanny packs are gay. Since when? When, show me one lesbian or gay person who have ever had a fanny pack. When has it ever been anything but a very straight accessory? Oh, be proud. Be proud of what? Of being a baby? Of being a big gay baby? Here we have a pink shirt, because of course you can't have any masculine colors. All our boys have to be emasculated. Nobody can wear blue anymore. Everything has to be pink all the time. Doesn't have to design in any other colors.
So as you can see, this is the sort of thing that that they do when they're having more lighthearted moments. And just to move on, there are also, you know, a lot of online resources now, and projects like Hatepedia, which is a Canadian-based database really of hate symbols. And there's also an I think there's at least there's the ADL, but there's also other American ones that have come up as well that, you know, give people the opportunity, if they come across a symbol online that they don't recognize or they're not sure about, there are places to go where they can research them. There are also a lot of online toolkits, you know, for the educators who are joining us this afternoon. Things like the Canadian Anti-Hate Network's education toolkit at antihate.school is an excellent one for just getting ideas and getting materials for free that you can use to help educate your class or help steer them away from if they're, you know, kind of going off the rails. And I won't linger too much on alternative media, but you know that it is one of the good things about being online that it's kind of created a more level playing field, that there are opportunities for journalists to reach readers, listeners, viewers that just didn't exist before when it was just broadcast TV and just newspapers and just traditional radio. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, whatever you did, whatever media you choose uh, to take in, you know, obviously do it with a critical eye and make sure that it is lining up with the values that, you know, you want to see in the world. So, and finally, I just want to touch on some of the blogs and grassroots projects that we see. I mean, there's one blog that I know of called ARC Collective. It's now mostly a retired blog, so I did not include the link to it. But there was this teacher in Alberta who's a good friend of mine, who just got tired of seeing all the hate that was happening. And he started this something like 14, 15 years ago. And he just said, well, someone has to say something. And so he just started this resource, and it's become like this really expansive thing that you can, it's still up online. You can go back and look on it. If there's groups that, you know, not obviously not ones that started this year, but if there are older groups like Proud Boys in Canada, Soldiers of Odin, Blood and Honor, groups that have been around a while, you can go and look up there and like learn about who they were and who they probably still are and things that they have done. Um, as moving, whoops, sorry, and moving on. We're also seeing like a lot of tech innovation around uh, actually for-profit companies as well. And this is one called Helm Life, and they do DEI training. And what's exciting about what they're doing is that they're taking DEI a step further, because a lot of it, you know, if you're in a webinar setting, a lot of it is like, okay, well, we're going to talk like this, and then we're going to go into breakout sessions, and then maybe we'll come back and have a discussion. And that's kind of the extent of it. But what they've developed is a way to do little cooperative online games that promote learning and as well as team building. And it's really kind of fun. And so this video, this I promise is my last video, is just 1 minute. And again, it's just so much easier for me to show you instead of to try to explain it. And I'll just play that now.
History. Rules of the game. You'll be working together to solve all the puzzles. Here are stories of the early Black settlement of many well-known cities.
Non-Settlement was founded by Josiah and okay.
Dresden.
Yeah, definitely Dresden. Yeah.
A is in Southwestern Ontario. Dresden.
Isn't that an amazing book? The fact that somebody is
Yeah. And blank Blackburn, well-known early black settlers in the history of blank. Tell me the answer. Wait, no, it's not. That doesn't make sense.
Try puzzle.
A puzzle.
All this stuff.
Oh, we're getting so close.
Yeah, this goes over here.
This one is here.
And we did it.
So anyway, that just gives you a brief idea about what sort of things there that's possible that we can do. And the second last thing that I want to touch on is something that's like completely organic that's happened is social media migration. And there's actually a friend that brought this to my attention who was saying, like, this is just really cool. Like, we haven't seen this before. And I think a lot of us, even those of us old enough to remember an analog era before social media and before computers were in every household and phones and all that, we forget how young all of this is within human history. And we really have not seen before people just leaving a platform en masse because they disagree and don't like the person who's running it. So, of course, we're talking about Elon Musk and Twitter and people moving to Blue Sky. But I wanted to juxtapose that with this graph from Media Matters for America. And what they did is they wanted to like really show the imbalance of influencers and their political beliefs. Specifically, I mean, there are some Canadians in the list, but specifically in the American context. And so they aggregated things from a variety of platforms that included Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, all of that kind of stuff, and came up with these numbers. Like Joe Rogan reaches 39.9 million subscribers. Jordan Peterson, 23 million. Like I mean, it's just kind of mind-boggling to me. And you see that there are a lot more red dots than there are blue dots in the graph. And so it can be really easy to feel, that there's no hope, that people who are on the hard right end of the political spectrum have obviously invested in influencers to create what we're seeing today, and we can't catch up. But we are still the consumers of the media. And if we decide just en masse to just say, well, sorry, Twitter, sorry, X, we're not on board with this anymore. It is a real opportunity for us, as small of a part as in each individual place, that we can go to somewhere else and we can like show our power that way. And so I just want to end on a more traditional note, because traditional grassroots that's where where I started. That's where my heart is. And there's still innovative things that are happening there. And one of the things that I was made aware of from a colleague and friend is an organization that started in Godrich when they were encountering a lot of anti-trans hate. And they started No Hate in Huron. And in order to like make a real solid point, they weren't content with just putting up flyers or anything like that, but to make a real solid point that hate was not welcome in their community, they hosted a 24-hour marathon cabaret with entertainment and education and food and everything, that just to make everybody feel welcome. And it was just so heartening to see that kind of strength in grassroots response, especially in the face of what we're seeing now. And while this isn't as new, just going to the middle picture on my slide, I'm still very moved by the rings of peace that I'm assuming most of you are familiar with them, but it's when if one faith-based community is attacked, other faith communities come and they form a ring around to show that we are here for you, we are here to protect you. And I did have the privilege of participating in one after the Quebec City mosque shooting, and it was an incredibly moving experience. And it was just also a way of connecting with other people offline, you know, just remembering the world that exists outside of the computers and outside of the games and social media. And it was just really wonderful. And the last thing also I wanted to mention is that there are efforts, and again, if we go back to that metaphor of raising all the boats in the harbor when you raise the water, is just mutual aid for people, because there are just so many gaps in our social fabric right now and so many people struggling. And one of the ones that I'm really quite partial to here in Toronto is the bike brigade, excuse me. And they will deliver food to people in need. And one of the agreements that they have with a variety of farmers markets here in the city is that they will get fresh from the farm produce donated from the farmers, and they will take them by bike around to the community fridges and pantries in the city so that people who really need access to this kind of food can get them. And I really think the more we do this kind of thing, the more we look at, you know, where is our, you know, where are the needs in our community, that we don't have to wait for anyone to come up with a plan, to do a study or anything like that. We can just find a need and say, hey, I want to do this thing. Who's with me? And let's do it. And so I guess that's my kind of call to action for all of you guys, you know, just to use that well-worn contemporary phrase, call to action, would be to just, you know, if you see something that's happening that you're really bothered by in your community, that you think like, we really need to do something about X, find something to do about X, and just contact your neighbors, contact your friends, contact your colleagues, and, you know, and start something. You know, and as Karen, I'm sure will say, you know, we're at ESJE, we're just a Margaret Mead kind of group that, you know, it's a small, you know, we're a small group of passionate people and that's the only thing that's really ever changed anything. So I will finish on that note. And if I recall correctly, we are going to move into Q&A now. Is that correct, Saleha?
Correct, absolutely. There's a comment there which validates what you were talking about, Liz, with respect to the experience of children that are in ice hockey. So the poster actually speaks about how they're exposed to racist, homophobic language from grade 4 onwards, to the point that by the time they hit grade 8, it has become the norm. So they don't even notice it, which in itself is such a telling piece around how racism is normalized, how homophobia is normalized, and how it becomes the par for the course. And so if somebody comes and says, hey, this wasn't the right thing to say, they kind of turn around and look at the person and say, what's the big deal? You know, why do you have such a thin skin? And I was just joking. Why do you get offended by everything? So you hear that kind of, you know, discussion happening, these kind of languages, kind of sentences, statements being thrown at people at all times. I know there's a question that is there. I do not, of course, we will be addressing it, but I did want to ask very, very quickly 2 questions before we start, because then Karen is going to be bringing it all to a close for us. The question that I had was for both of you specifically, but for anyone who is invested in stopping hatred, and then they are on the you know, they're on the social media, they happen to be on Facebook, like the old fogey that I am, and then they get to see all those kind of commentary. One of the best ways I wish to ruin my day, week, month is I just go to a newspaper and I only have to look at the comment section, and that will basically make sure I don't sleep for 3 nights in a row. So good way to get some work done at that time for me. All I'm saying is, what do you do for your mental health and well-being? Because that is so essential for you. And that's not just so essential for you. I'll tell you selfishly why this question is that I'm putting forward as teachers, as people in public service, as neighbors, as parents, as sisters, as aunties, as uncles, as just an individual human being that is here because they basically have a sense of compassion towards the other humans that are around them. When you see hurt, harm, racism, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, ableism, ageism, misogyny, everything being just poured forward on one person or a group of people, that makes us hurt. That hurts us and harms us equally as well. What are you doing to take care of yourselves? Because we, as I said selfishly, need people like you to continue to do this work. How do you take care of yourself?
I guess I'll start. I mean, for me, first of all, when I see posts and see things like what you're describing, I have to try to remind myself that these things are constructed to get that maximum emotional impact. You know, it's not by accident, it's often by design to be, the most outrageous, the most violent, whatever it is that we're seeing. And so, I mean, for me, really just moderating how much time I spend on social media and mainstream news media as well is just really important. That it's a balance that everyone has to find for themselves, but like we need to remember that we as the consumers, even though it doesn't feel like it, we as the consumers of media, we are in control of what we see and take in and what we consume and how we let that impact us. And if it's a really difficult news day, I'll make sure I'm informed, and if I can, I'll make time to go for a walk. I'll go spend time with my family. I'll try to, put on a funny movie or something like that, like, anything in order to just, it always feels kind of frivolous, like, oh my gosh, all of this stuff is happening. How can I possibly just go for a walk at a time like this? But, we have to remember that if we burn out, who's left to carry on the work? So we have to, put on our own mask, as they like to say, before we're like going to put all the attention on social media.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much. There are a couple of more questions where I think we can kind of collapse a few. I'm very aware of the time. So Heather, if it's okay, I'm going to ask you this. What are you looking for within your friends, family member, student, niece, nephew, son, daughter, brother, sister, father, mother, to say, oh, they seem to be going down a rabbit hole. What are the signs when you start seeing people getting into that anti-racist? Sorry, sorry, my focus is so much on anti-racism. Sorry, on racist ideology or white supremacy, or just going into a very, very strong, hateful rhetoric. What would be some of the signs?
I think it does go back to social media. Oftentimes we see an increase in our work right around the holidays. You're starting to spend more time with people around the dinner table. You're visiting family members, and you're recognizing and realizing there are new comments. There are very racist comments. Maybe there's just a T-shirt that they're wearing, or an offhanded comment that you're like that. That is not you normally. That is not how we've interacted in the past. And asking them about it, or maybe they have new social media posts or a new group of friends, or there's oftentimes those small changes that you see in a person's way of being within the family space where they feel comfortable. And oftentimes that will slightly change. You'll maybe see younger people starting to be online more, gravitating towards individuals who feel and believe the same things that they're now feeling and believing. You know, acts of rebellion, you know, going against what the family you know, believes. If they're very religious in some way, then the child is saying that they're atheist or agnostic, or you know, not celebrating family gatherings and things like that, and having reasons why, you know, well, Uncle so and so, you know, is gay, or you know, I don't believe this is happening or that's happening and you guys do, and so I have a different political view. So we'll see some of that, and then you'll start to see major signs, mood swings and things like that. So all stuff to be aware of. You know, obviously their mental health issues can also have the same, they can have the same predictors and the same issues. So just knowing, and we always say, call people in, ask them what they're feeling, what they're going through. Don't assume, but also make sure that you are aware and ready to have those hard conversations. And, you know, if it becomes too difficult, Life After Hate is always there to assist in that conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know as both of you were speaking, Heather and Liz, I was thinking about Gen Alpha. I was thinking about my nephews and niece. So the light of my life are the triplets that are my nephews and niece. And, you know, my world does definitely revolve around them, but they're also the children who started school during COVID. And so all of their schooling, all of their education until practically grade 4 was online. Everything they did was online. So the idea of their parents, my sister and my brother-in-law, of, oh, no screen time, just got flushed down the toilet. So now, of course, they have a lot of access to screen, not just for school purposes, but also for entertainment as well. And that is definitely one thing that I know we have to be continuously aware of within our own families. And, you know, this is something that we all do. There was a question specifically around resources. I know, Liz, you have shared quite a few. There is the ARC blog. So capital A, capital R, capital C blog. You talked about Helm Life. I'm looking very quickly down on my page. You talked about Hatepedia. You talked about the Bike Brigade, which I thought was phenomenal. I think that's just the kind of work that we all need to be doing anyway. Of course, you have ESJE. There is a website and there is a list of resources that are available there. So for those of you who are looking for specific resources around this, I think you'll be able to find that. There is a question around, what do you do with challenges when education, anti-racist education, is being called as being woke? You know, so that, and of course, and I think it's in line, to me, it's in line with another question that is asked about, how do we really deal with commentary that comes at us when you're doing this work, as if we are doing something wrong, as if we are the one who's challenging, quote unquote, the norm. And so we become the bad people who are doing this work. So how do we really deal with that, right? What is it that we can say to them? So I'm going to give both Liz and Heather literally like 30 seconds, because I have one last question for Karen then. So if both of you can say, and I'm sure you've already been at the receiving end of this kind of, you know, communication, to say, oh, how woke you think you are, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. What do you say to the people who are saying this stuff to you? So, Liz?
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. Go. You know what, Heather? Go ahead.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I'll just go. That is a really good question. It could be an entire webinar in and of itself. I will say, I always respond, you know, kindness, compassion, and empathy are something that we want everybody to have. People can term it woke, they can call it DEI, they can call it whatever they'd like to term it and turn it into something pejorative. But it is, at its essence, kindness, empathy, and compassion. And all of us need to have that. And we want our children to grow up in a world that has kindness, empathy, and compassion. And if you're going to call it woke, or you're going to call it something else, and you're going to say we don't need it, I'd like people to reframe it as kindness, empathy, and compassion.
Thank you so much. Liz?
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Heather just said. And I'd also say too that if and when I end up in a conversation with somebody who gives, some pretty intense pushback, I think it's important to, just kind of set aside all of the sort of instinct around, wanting to prove them, wanting to prove to them like, no, we're, we're right about this. Like, and it just seems so like kind of obvious that, well, everyone being treated with respect and equity and all of that, that's obvious, but we have to remember that, we have to reach people where they are. And if that person isn't there yet, maybe we need to listen, maybe we need to ask questions, maybe we need to find a common concern of common ground that we all share, whether that's, wanting to keep food on the table at this point in time is like a common concern for many of us. So, there are always like opportunities to, just kind of take a step back and take a breath and just like find the common ground so that people don't have their backs up about everything. And then you can like kind of build the conversation from there.
Thank you. And thank you, Willie, for that question. I think that was a very, very important question to have on board. Last two questions that have been posed on the Q&A. I'm kind of looking at you, Karen. So the one is more in terms of when we're dealing with language or contentious language that would be coming from our, chosen parliamentarians. And I think I'm looking at you because of the work that you've done with again, being the ED for Canadian Race Relations Foundation, being part of the League of Rights, being the person that you are, the co-chair for the hate crime community working group, where you ended up challenging constantly whatever the narrative for people in power has been. So I think that is a question that I'm going to kind of fold in with another very, very critical question, which is what racism that Palestinians themselves are facing, and I'm going to specify to the experience of Palestinian Arabs within the Canadian context. I'm not taking it globally at all. Within our own neighborhoods, at work, at schools. So for that, would that be considered hate? Is that a reflection of hate as we understand it and recognize it under the Canadian context, Canadian legal context? Karen, you're still mute.
Sorry, and I understand I was freezing up before, so I hope, I don't know why, because I'm right in the heart of downtown Toronto, so can you hear me properly?
You're good.
Okay, so let me deal with the second question first, and then you'll have to remind me a little bit about what the first question was about in terms of language, because I'm thinking of language and power, even in response to the last question about wokeness. Because, of course, we had to go through that whole period years ago where people in power who wanted to preserve their power and not share it used to say, oh, please look at all this political correctness. So it was called political correctness, and we were told there was a political correctness movement. But really, it was about people who were putting you down because they wanted to maintain their right to put other people down, you see, and be in power. So now those that are trying to undermine our kind of work say, oh, well, you're just woke, and they'll call you names. And usually it's people who call names and use language who don't have any real arguments or data. They revert to calling names. Oh, stop being so politically correct, or you're just woke, or you're the one who's the hate monger. There's all this sort of gaslighting where where they want to blame you for being the one because of your advocacy for causing more problems. Well, I guess I did kind of deal with the former question. Now the latter. Now the latter question. The experience of Palestinians in Canada, is that hate? Well, let's be frank. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. There's a tendency, and our work, by the way, just so that we're very upfront in terms of enhancing social justice education, is for all people, and our group is diverse and includes Muslims and Palestinians and Black people and gay people, and you name all the people that are in marginalized groups, as well as non-marginalized and white people who know what this work can and should be all about and are change agents. So I'm putting in a plug before my final remarks of asking those who want to strengthen this kind of work to join us. When I say sometimes it's hate and sometimes it's not, sometimes racism against people of color, Palestinians who are racialized, is actually racist. But this tendency to want to label all disagreements with the Palestinian narrative as racism is a problem. So how do we sort out? This ties right in with our topic. What is hate and what isn't? I can remember a while ago people saying, well, I'm not racist. I don't hate Blacks, as if racism was only hatred. And it's not. Racism is systemic. Racism can be making someone feel uncomfortable. It can be microaggressions. There can be all forms of anti-Palestinianism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. It's not always hatred. Sometimes it's ignorance. So that's why I want us to sort out what's actually hate and what isn't, and what really needs to be stopped. And then also, what is the motivation? If a person lashes out at somebody and calls them a hateful name because they themselves have been traumatized, we know what trauma does to people. I mean, it could be that somebody killed their grandmother on either side of a conflict like this. And so the trauma triggers this and needs to be dealt with differently. It still doesn't mean that somebody can say or do something hateful against Palestinians, no matter what their trauma is, nor can they or should they say something hateful against Jews or Muslims or others. We've got to sort it out, and we've got to provide more education. So disagreeing with someone's narrative and they have another narrative, isn't racist, and it's not hateful. It's that the educators and those who are going to intervene need to help people have the historical understanding and understand what's fact and what's not fact, what's propaganda and what's not. And absolutely, the questioner, I believe, because I could see the question, said that they were just learning more about hate. I remember there was one point where a Jewish activist said to me, Islamophobia should only be defined as anti-Muslim hatred. Well, no. Islamophobia is the word. You need a different word for these things because Muslims have been racialized, Palestinians have been racialized, Jews have been racialized. We have to understand that we need different terms, that not everything is racism, not everything is anti-Semitism, not everything. And so I said to the Jewish person, no, what would you say if you only defined anti-Semitism as Jew hatred? Because it's not. It can be systemic. It can be that the holidays aren't properly celebrated or a microaggression. It can be all the same things. So we need to counter discrimination in all of its forms, whether it's against Palestinians, whether it's against Jews, Muslims, white people, whether people are distorting language and suddenly accusing all white people of being white supremacists. You know, how is that even possible when that's language that's been borrowed and distorted to suit people's politics? You see, so that relates to your question of language. And what it makes me realize is I'm hoping that you're when we send out the evaluation for these things, that people will tell us what other topics they would like to go into more depth on. And I mean, this should be one of them.
Mhm.
What is racism and what isn't? What is hate and what isn't? And labeling everything racism means nothing is racism. So we need another word for all the different forms of discrimination against Palestinians, against Jews, against Muslims, against others, and not distort language of other people's oppression
Mhm. Mhm.
to
No,
try to suit one. And
yeah.
I hope that we'll have opportunity to discuss that at more length.
I really appreciate, Karen, what you're saying. One of the things you mentioned, uh, quite continuously, of course, is the term microaggression. That is, of course, is also a term that really needs to be discussed further, because it's no longer an issue of death by 1,000 cuts. It is in your face. It is the impact is intense. The impact for any sort of violence that happens, whether it is racial violence, whether it's sexist violence, whether it's violence based on sexual orientation or trans status, anything that they're doing, anything that people are really being engaged in, by calling it, in my mind, by calling it microaggression, that is like minimizing the impact when it's not, when it shouldn't be. These are not microaggressions.
Yes,
Micro
yes,
could be like
you're
maybe
right.
once,
No,
I don't know, a year, I would consider it. But once they're
yeah,
happening on a daily basis,
yeah,
on a continuous basis, on are actually baked into the fabric and baked into the systems that we work in, they're no longer micro. They're
you're
pretty
right.
darn micro.
We have to sort that out. It can't just be jargon. But
Exactly.
I meant real microaggressions. And I meant that it has a name. And the other thing I hope people will stop doing is saying that we name something Islamophobia or we name something anti-Semitism. It's to silence people. So we
Mhm.
too often hear people say, "Oh, you're calling that anti-Semitism to silence Palestinian voices." Well, or you're calling that,
Right.
racism to
Yeah.
silence white voices. No. So we need to understand and use, teachers have the skills. They've learned empathetic communication for other purposes. They've learned how to sort out what does somebody really mean by what they've said. But when they're targeted or the teachers don't know what to do or they don't have the knowledge, they shut down the communication. And what we're hoping to do is help by providing resources. And I'm kind of leading myself because I see there's 5 minutes left, and that was the 5 minutes I was going to get to share my screen and go into the next steps for us, if that's okay. Are we okay with that? Are we at that stage where we're going to wrap up? Or were there
We
any
can
more?
totally do that because, well, Helen Adams had a beautiful a comment, and I thought that was an excellent recommendation. I told her that was when she said, if somebody says you're woke or why you're woke, ask. Oh, sorry, somebody says you're woke, ask them, well, why are you not? I thought that's a fantastic way of really putting the question back to the individual to say, really have that conversation. What do you think wokeness is? And if you think me being woke is such a bad thing, well, let's talk about it. As far as I'm concerned, why are you not woke, right? So I really appreciated that. And I think that in a way really is a great segue for Karen now to take us into next steps.
And I also see someone said, can you provide us with a list of resources? So that's
Yeah.
really the segue into what I was going to say. So I've got to share my screen again. And I've got to go to that last slide quicker, right? Oops, sorry. And I will, oh, there it is. And the next slide was really just to wrap up. And there was a manual written a while ago contributed by people from all different backgrounds, called Taking Action Against Hate. And I think that what this session has emphasized is that when we take action against hate and define it, it really is about protection, prevention, and partnerships. So the themes that came out were that we do need the laws and the hate crimes legislation and understand what is protected speech and what should not be protected speech. And we can provide you with more of the slides that give more detail into the different forms of hatred if people would like that. Prevention, education in all of its forms at every level of the system, from early childhood right up to postgraduate and public education as well. So this isn't, people like to pass the buck, and some people will say, oh, this is all the fault of the police, or this is all the fault of the government, or this is all the fault. This is multidisciplinary, this field. So we need the laws, the codes, the policies, and everyone has to know to whom can they report safely. Do you know that with hate crimes and with incidents of racism and hatred, only 1 in 10 incidents is ever reported because people think nothing will be done, and often nothing is done. Or under the guise of confidentiality, they don't even tell you how things were settled. So protection, prevention, and partnership. And people did stress the importance of allies and checking in on each other. Partnerships with anyone and everyone who wants to partner with us, the different intercultural groups, the multiracial groups, other community groups, law enforcement, school boards, anyone and everyone who can help. So there's the take. I'm an old teacher, so it's show and tell. So there's the Taking Action Against Hate manual. That's a training manual for individuals, institutions, and community groups. There's the Is Your Child a Target? People were asking about recruitment and how can you tell when kids have been targeted by extremist groups. A very valuable pamphlet, guidelines for parents and teachers on the dangers of hate group hate group and extremist recruitment in Canada. There's the Responding to Hate Crimes booklet. Actually, Saleha was one of the authors of that, and I've even got a little piece in there that was done for police, and it even had guidelines that they could put in their pocket of how to recognize hate crime and what was and wasn't hate crime and how to work with communities. You can still get copies of the hate crime strategy for Ontario, and there's even a CD that has the resources in it. Hate Crimes in Canada was done by the Association of Chiefs of Police. There's the Combating Hatred pieces that were done for law enforcement, for lawyers. Don't forget about the equity and inclusive education strategy and the resources in schools that are truly inclusive. And a little plug for this terrific book, Stop the Hate for Goodness Sake. And we have the 2 authors, Professors Campbell and Professor Schwartz, on April the 8th, mark it down, hold the date, who will be doing a webinar. And this book is truly inclusive and very practical guidelines for educators. Why did I show you the pictures? It's to say you don't have to reinvent the wheel. People want to make it their own. Governments do that. They shred all the old documents because they want to put their own logo on. Make sure that you contact those who have the institutional memory. And when I put that note there that says resources to follow, we are going to compile a list and send it to all the participants in this webinar of all the resources that were mentioned and then some, and even share some articles on the topic with you when we do our follow-up. So keep your questions coming in. And I can't thank our panelists enough. Thank you, Saleha, for moderating and for the work you did on the previous workshop and for the resources that you can provide on hate. Heather and Liz, Both of you have so much to offer. I must admit, I know Liz's work a little bit more closely in the kind of wonderful work she's done in schools with high school students, with teachers, with educators, with law enforcement. And now I know I've been introduced to a new resource in your organization and the resources you have. So thank you so much. The comments were coming in of what an inspiring session this has been. I don't know why I couldn't undo the capitalization. You know, lowercase capitals, whatever. There's our email address, info@ESJ education.ca, and there's our website. You'll be able to communicate with us at any time, and we invite you all to continue the work, to be well, to look after yourselves as well, and we're here to help if we can. Thank you so much for your participation today.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Heather. It has been an absolute honor.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Keep those cards and letters coming.